Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Macau and the world. And I would like to thank the foundation, Rui Cunha, for this opportunity just to share some thoughts in the context of what we call an open lecture, aula aberta. Since I'm here in Macau at the invitation of the City University of Macau, and we will just think through this idea of creative regulatory environments. We'll think it through from an academic perspective that can also be applied, can also be a policy. We know that we stand today in a region that started to change almost 40 years ago in the context of reform and opening up. And the way Chinese authorities decided to go about it was having an experimental approach. So this experimental approach is a way to foster industrial change, sectoral transformation, and today, after all these years, we have in other geographies also the beginning of an initiative to use experimentation to transform sectors, industries, of course, but entire economies. So this is the trend now in regulation. There are some key assumptions regarding how the real economy develops. So we know that markets are exchange places, but they are also very dense in terms of norms, standards, laws, rules, but they are also dynamic in the sense of being the arena for new products, new technologies, new knowledge bases. So this is one key item. Another key item is that regulation is usually conceived as a sort of restriction on action, on private actors. But we have reasons to see regulation and market supervision as more than that. They actually shape and steer the ways in which firms and exchanges between the demand and supply in markets process. So regulation can have this role of stimulating innovation, of unleashing new forces that were unexpected, of co-evolving with the private forces. So that means that regulation is also part of learning. Indeed, today we have the practice in some countries of already giving a role to regulatory sandboxes. That will be the term here. And these regulatory sandboxes are for players, especially the private players, to introduce devices and solutions that could not be tested in the normal market landscape, but if they are given a sort of bubble in which they can do things that otherwise will be illegal, they can actually see how the solutions and devices play out and regulators themselves can learn from what is going on, and they will be able to accommodate the innovations when one day they will be rolled out outside these protected areas. Yeah, so that's the main set of assumptions. I will just flesh out what we mean by a regulatory sandbox, which is a sort of institutional setup that already has got some ideas behind it in the West, and I will also shed some light on the Portuguese experience and the Brazilian experience in two different areas, two different industries, and then just wrap it up with some cross checks with the Greater Bay region. All right, so these sandboxes are now being taken as actual policy in some countries. They are institutional constructs that basically isolate a space in which testing can take place at low risk, at low cost. These can be probably the first step before scaling up those products and processes. And it started out in the financial industry, but now it is much wider than that. So we have today a number of approaches to implement sandboxes, and usually the sectoral regulators are part of these spaces. So they are also, in the sense, background players. All right, so we have the integration of these regulators with the innovators. So innovation and regulation is coexisting now at a closer context, and usually the benefits that justify these approaches are those that usually are used to attribute value to innovation. Basically, the companies will have lower barriers to entry to do these trials because they have less uncertainty regarding the backlash from regulators. And of course, everything is very contingent on the particular lessons that can be drawn. So for lawyers and these professions, this is also a language that they understand. So the case-by-case approach is something that can build in the more general frameworks that can actually be more sophisticated for the entire market. In the literature, regulatory sandboxes have been growing as an object of analysis, and this gives us some idea that at the turn of the 2020s, they became accepted already in the academic literature, and this is because already some actual cases of sandboxes were having some experience, right? Some experience. With experiments, experience is one of the outcomes. Portugal is one country in which these ideas popped up quite early in the game. So by 2018, it was being mentioned, and actually not long after that, it became something that the government actually issued as a short-term goal, and these regulatory sandboxes were called in Portuguese zonas livres tecnológicas, and in fact they became very popular among the various clusters in Portugal. So the decree at the government level that started this all out framed the regulatory sandbox in terms of clusters of activities. All right, so if we talk about finance, actually finance or banking is an ecosystem. For instance, financial payment methods are one of the key issues. Many of the companies that are introducing these payment methods are non-banking entities. So the idea was to think about clusters, not to think about isolated or linear sectors. All right, so there was a framework to roll out these sandboxes, and the first one was actually promoted by the military in Portugal, by the Navy. So the public sector was actually the key driver, not only of the setup, but as a promoter. So this reveals, for instance, by the Navy, a great entrepreneurial agenda. And south of Lisbon, in Setúbal, at the old base of Troia, they came up with the idea of doing there something along the lines of the new template that the government flagged as the institutional device to have these things. So they had the idea before. The government came up with the framework, and they were fast to fill the gap. They actually had a vision. The vision is quite robust, and it is connected with new technologies that are really emerging, and these technologies are many times deployed at sea, but also on land, and also in the air. So all the elements, without forgetting cyberspace, without forgetting the digital sphere. In this place, they came up with a concept that could accommodate this multi-dimensional ability of understanding innovation. All right, so the Navy has got many ideas for that. They have exercises. They have sometimes military exercises in which new technologies, new systems can be used, and for that it's interesting to derive some lessons. These lessons can be the basis for the next exercise. But now they have a procedure to accumulate knowledge. So that's one key novelty over here. So REP-MUS has been one of the key exercises that have actually given meaning to the Dom Henrique Zona Livre Tecnológica. Yeah, so by 2022, with many navies from the world, not only NATO navies, we could see an exercise involving drones that immediately became the exercise or the place and the place in time in the world in which more drones are used, are tested. And actually, I think that when we had this first real exercise in 2022, we had the largest use ever in Portuguese history of radio spectrum. At least that's how I take it. All right, so everybody uses radio spectrum. I'm using it when I control the computer to power away the presentation. We controlling the TV set remotely. We use radio spectrum. Mobile phones use it. Radar signals travel in spectrum using airwaves. Basically, this is everywhere, and a key regulator in this exercise was the Portuguese Authority for Communications, where at the time I myself had a role, and so I could see it from quite close, the importance of having the Navy as a promoter, the regulator close to the Navy, having its role because it controls radio spectrum as a public good, and then we could see the operators. In this case, navies would operate the systems, but then we also saw the innovators themselves. Who were they? Of course, they were the vendors. They were the firms that produced the equipment, and they wanted also to make the most of seeing them used in practice in, of course, an institutionally safe place. Yeah, so here you can see some pictures I myself was documenting back then, in which we had the subsurface technologies, surface technologies, and above surface technologies. Yeah, so just for you to have a view as well. Here you have a Twitter post in which there is the name IDD. So IDD is the Portuguese actor promoting exports in the military cluster. So you see that immediately you have an ecology of different organizations that are able to find a place and to give a contribution. Yeah, so in Brazil, I come now not from a communications or telecommunications or radio spectrum perspective. Of course, drones need to go through signals to be effective, but here it's a different industry, is energy, in particular electricity, and the Brazilian regulator for electricity and related affairs was keen on testing the idea of sandboxes to see if many actors would be interested, and in fact many were, and they went through a selection process to be the first to connect their business models to this opportunity. And basically the focus of the regulator was just tariff design. This tariff design is very important because you have to balance out many issues, like social issues. So the price level is very important, but sometimes you have to balance that with incentives for producers that are connected with consumers. And in the middle you have the grids, you have this distribution and last mile operators. So you have always, again, this ecosystem view. You have this cluster perspective. Yeah. So in fact, many design pricing design schemes were tested, and always with these regulatory exemption, so they don't have to abide by the normal rules of the regulator. But in fact, the findings can impact future policy, future pricing policy, not current pricing policy. So that the regulator can be ready for the new schemes if it decides to authorize. It's almost like pre-regulating them, because all of these solutions were tested in front of the regulator, in full disclosure to the regulator, thereby diminishing information asymmetries and lowering uncertainty. Yeah. So this is more or less the spirit of the sandbox approach to learning, experimentation, and innovation. We know, number one, that it has become an established academic concept. Yeah. This is because, of course, you have now empirical data. That is, some countries have, in some sectors, rolled out some sandboxes. Actually, Portuguese-speaking countries have not been late. They have their own very peculiar experience. And yeah, that's useful. That's useful. That's a useful thing to have. The Portuguese regulatory environment is now rich in terms of learning through experiments. So prior to the entry of 5G, we did some things that today perhaps we could phrase it as sandboxes. It was not phrased like that, but we allowed companies to do their 5G trials. So that's before market deployment. In established businesses like digital television, the regulator was a procurer of new technologies to monitor the activity of the digital television, meaning that the regulator was buying new advanced technological systems and sometimes collaborating in the design of those systems. So there is this innovation regulation dynamics going on. Sometimes when the Portuguese regulator, for instance, in the Formula One championship in Portugal, in the Algarve, when the regulator was there, this was an interesting contact with mobility, actually future mobility. Why is that? Because a racing car like that in the picture has got over 50 sensors. These sensors will send out signals to the racing track, which is also full of sensors. The information will then go to the boxes. It will go to the headquarters of Formula One. Everything is very network-based. Everything is now mobility and communications, so very complex. And the regulator was close to learn, because if the racing is many times ahead of the market, if you are with these sort of prototypes of future solutions, you are now ahead of the curve. This is also some moment in which you have regulation and innovation closer together. So yeah, this is important to have policymakers, regulators, agencies getting closer to the action, to think that desk-based research is not enough. We have to open the windows, go through the doors, be in contact with those that are actually introducing the new solutions, and be clear that sometimes they fail. Failure is a source of knowledge. The lessons that are valid, they may be only context specific. So learning has to continue one day outside the sandbox. But yeah, it's important to get up to date, and for public authorities, this is very crucial, very, very crucial indeed. So regulation is about doing, is about using the technologies as well, is about interacting with those that usually are the doers, which are those in the private sector. Yeah, so sandbox is we can see it's a particular case of interactive learning. All right, so there you go. A sandbox is a way to bring two things that usually don't mix, innovation and regulation. Yeah. Is using paradox in a productive way. So yeah, I just am using my own specific take on regulatory sandboxes. So I tend to see them as in a broader lenses, talking about them as creative regulatory environments, and I see that they can be very local, they can be regional. One day they can be, of course, wider than that, like in the Greater Bay. So very recently, last month, we have seen the Chinese policymakers from Beijing talking about, you know, putting the free trade zones in the new era, pushing them to new quality productivity paradigm, to use the language of Beijing these days. And for the Portuguese speaking countries, this may be seen as an opportunity. This is because we have this interface called Macau, because the most spoken language in the northern hemisphere is Chinese, but the most spoken language in the southern hemisphere is Portuguese. These two languages coexist in Macau. We have now this deeper integration, deeper cooperation space, Engine just nearby, and Macau is already different from the mainland. It's already a place in which we can roll out new products and processes to see how they could then be picked up elsewhere, maybe picked up in other Portuguese-speaking places and regions. And of course, having this culture of experimentation, of being with the other in harmony, all of these traditional ideas in this new era may be actually a way to have interactive learning between all of us. Yeah. So that's basically my argument over here. Just to repeat, we are talking about learning processes, and the economy is a learning process. In the end of the day, the macroeconomy is a sandbox, and we have this opportunity to have experiments as catalysts for wider deployment. And yeah, we would say that the future is already here, and it's a question of taking out the best lessons, but giving room to those that want to learn. Thank you very much.
Hello, Sandro. Thank you so much for your presentation. You mentioned Henshin, and Henshin could be a very strong case for sandbox purposes. And I was wondering if you ever thought about, you know, what kind of beta products we could launch there in Hengqin. Of course, 6G, it crossed my mind, like 6G, like autonomous driving, maybe low altitude economy as well.
Oh yeah.
But talking with the Portuguese-speaking countries and this region of the Great Bay Area, what do you think can be other beta products that or things that we can be launched there?
So excellent ideas. So yeah, mobility already is going on like that in an autonomous way. So talking about buses, so that is already happening. But other things, as you said, the low altitude mobility economy, that's also something that actually can be taken as a pilot scheme, because you have the delta. Many times we see water as an obstacle. Too many times. You see even the connection between some of our countries like Brazil and Portugal. As if the Atlantic Ocean would be an obstacle, yeah? Sometimes can be an opportunity, in fact. Here it's a challenge. The delta is a challenge. You want to be agile in combining individuals in the same space. So you need to have flexibility. And in fact, the complexity of using drones to carry people is big, or carrying merchandise is big, because you have to define corridors, you have to define signaling, you have to find out the best spots, and to actually bring all that regulation that usually is applied to airplanes or to helicopters. Now you are at a level that is more granular in terms of micromobility, using sort of helicopters without drivers, yeah. So that's definitely one very good place to start. But you have also others, like the healthcare sector, yeah. So in the healthcare sector, many times you have products that are not really medicines. They can be taken as supplements to the food chain, and even not being medicines, sometimes they may have trouble in being accepted in countries in which regulation is very dense, like Portugal, like Brazil, just to mention the examples I mentioned here, or even in my talk now. Yeah, so I see biomedical products as an example. This is already going on also in Hengqin, with companies in the industrial park that are not only developing their own supplements, but they are already marketing them, and not only are marketing them in Macau, they are using the symbols of Macau in the packaging, which is a way actually in which we see these innovators honoring Macau as the anchor for Hengqin. Yeah, so this is going on right now, and in a few instances we have seen mobility. Yes, we have seen airspace. We have seen also this sort of biomedical area even, but there are other areas like new materials and the need to have a circular, sustainable economy that is more friendly to recycling and all of that. This is also going on in Hengqin. Yeah, so you have actually traditional sectors that are now repositioned. And yeah, so it will be interesting that authorities in Macau, authorities in China, authorities in the Portuguese-speaking countries could see this as a common resource, this place in which we have many worlds coexisting as an opportunity and a multiplier.
Thank you.
I'm fine with no questions. I don't have a moderator to ask me any questions, so I'm fine with no questions. I can be the moderator and say that the session is over. Should I? Obrigado.